I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. Today on ABC News Live, the January 6th committee is holding its latest high-stakes hearing this afternoon. Hear how the committee plans to make the case about alleged ties between violent extremist groups and former President Trump's inner circle, and how they aim to show the former president's own words inspired the riot at the Capitol. Also ahead, concerns over a new highly transmissible COVID subvariant, now accounting for more than half of new cases in the U.S. What we're learning about the symptoms and the effectiveness of an upcoming Omicron-specific booster. And the growing effort to defend the ancient giant sequoia trees in Yosemite National Park. The latest on the raging wildfire putting them in danger and the new signs of progress. But we begin with the January 6th committee holding its 7th hearing today. The committee is expected to make the case that former President Trump's own words inspired his supporters to breach the Capitol to try to stop the certification of the 2020 election. The committee is also expected to focus on alleged ties between extremist groups and key Trump allies, and a White House meeting about an alleged plan to seize voting machines. Congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has the latest from Capitol Hill. Hi, Rachel.
Diane, good morning. And that is the big question hanging over these hearings is what connection, if any, did the violent extremists that stormed the Capitol on January 6th have to former President Donald Trump and his allies? Well, today the committee will try to make that link. They'll be pointing to a tweet from the former president telling his supporters to be there on January 6th, saying that it would be wild. And the committee will make the case that those words served as a signal to violent extremist groups like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. They will hear from the former spokesperson for the Oath Keepers, Jason Van Tatenhove, as well as Stephen Ayers, one of the rioters who traveled to Washington, D.C. from Ohio. He stormed the Capitol on January 6th, warning of a possible civil war, even pointing to that tweet from the former president. We're also told that a big focus of today's hearing will also be in the weeks and the days leading up to the insurrection, including a meeting at the White House where outside advisors floated brazen ideas like seizing voting machines from around the country. And in a striking development, it will likely be the first time we hear any of that taped testimony from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone. Remember, he was the top Trump White House lawyer at the time. He sat with the committee for several hours in a taped deposition last week. And we are told that he did confirm some parts of Cassidy Hutchins' testimony, Diane.
All right, Rachel Scott, thank you. And ABC's Alex Perche joins me live from Capitol Hill now, along with investigative reporter Catherine Falders for more on this. Catherine, a good portion of today's hearing will focus on that meeting in the Oval Office on December 18th about a plan to declare a national emergency to seize voting machines.
Yeah, this was one of the most bizarre meetings of the Trump presidency. It took place in the Oval Office. Parts of it turned into screaming matches. You had lawyers there like Pat Cipollone, former White House lawyer Eric Hirschman, the chief of staff, Rudy Giuliani, these outside Trump allies who we think we'll hear more from today, including Sidney Powell and Michael Flynn. They were essentially pushing these theories that they wanted the Department of Homeland Security to seize voting machines, and they wanted to appoint Sidney Powell to be this special counsel to investigate these false claims of election interference and election fraud. We know that former President Trump was in that meeting. There was lots of disagreement during that meeting from Mark Meadows and from Pat Cipollone. Now, the committee plans to tie this meeting to a tweet that you heard Rachel talk about a bit that former President Trump sent out just shortly after this meeting, telling his supporters to be there, that it would be wild. They're also going to tie that to of course, these militia groups, these extremist groups who viewed that as a call to action. So all of these elements coming together here today in this hearing.
Now, Alex, what can you tell us about this former spokesperson for the Oath Keepers, and what are we expecting to hear about that and other extremist organizations today?
Well, Diane, his name is Jason Van Tatenhove. And keep in mind, with this testimony that we're expecting to hear from him, there have already been at least 3 senior Oath Keepers who have pled guilty to seditious conspiracy to prevent Biden from taking power. So a key question that this committee is going to look to connect the dots on is there evidence clearly linking any political associates of the former president to the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers? And so this is part of that narrative that they could potentially connect the dots on.
Catherine, we also expect to hear recorded testimony from the former White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. Why is that so important?
Yeah, this is crucial here. He was the top lawyer in the White House, present for many of these meetings where these fringe theories about the election were essentially permeating the White House. I'm told that he talked about a lot of those theories and who was bringing them into the building and who was involved, including former Trump lawyer John Eastman. He also shed more light on conversations about pardons, whether they be for members of Congress or others. We're also told that he'll discuss that Oval Office meeting that occurred when Trump wanted to appoint that DOJ official Jeffrey Clark to lead the Department of Justice. We also know, according to our sources, that Cipollone said that he thought Trump going to the Capitol on that day was a bad idea. So expect to hear more from him on all of that and the legality that surrounded all of these issues as they were unfolding in real time.
Now, Alex, the Justice Department's investigation concluded the attack on the Capitol was planned by senior leaders of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. How significant would it be if the committee can establish ties between those groups and people close to the former president? Could there be consequences from that?
Well, certainly there could be consequences, and it's very significant. In fact, it's the purpose of this entire investigation. Look, the DOJ has already considered its investigation on who committed the violence and who organized and financed that attack. We know the DOJ has concluded the assault on the Capitol was far from spontaneous, that it was hatched well in advance of January 6th by senior leaders from the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. And one of the critical questions that was laid out in the very first public hearing was whether or not the attack at the Capitol was coordinated and planned. They were trying to draw that link between the leaders from the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the White House, the Trump administration. And so that is something that could come from today.
All right, Alex Prochet, Catherine Falders, thank you both. And we will have full coverage of today's hearing starting at 1 p.m. Eastern right here on ABC News Live. And concerns are growing over a new highly transmissible COVID subvariant. Health officials say it does not seem to be causing more severe illness, but it is spreading fast, potentially sending more people to the hospital. Eva Pilgrim is tracking the latest, including what to know about new Omicron-specific vaccines.
Health officials sounding the alarm. With COVID resurging, experts are warning the BA.5 variant could be the most transmissible yet. That variant now driving infections, making up more than half of the country's new cases. The U.S. averaging 100,000 new cases daily. But since most home tests go unreported, experts warn that number could actually be 7 times higher.
When you're talking about a virus that's not going to be eradicated, it's not going to be eliminated, it's much more important to focus not on cases, but on hospitalizations and hospital capacity concerns.
This as an average of 5,200 virus-positive Americans are hospitalized each day, the highest number of daily admissions since February. Moderna gearing up now for its variant-specific booster, saying its vaccine candidate produced almost twice the number of neutralizing antibodies as its current booster vaccine 1 month after injection. But that new shot won't likely be available until October or November.
There is some urgency to figure out the composition of the vaccine for the fall. We don't want to be in a situation where we have a rise in cases ahead of vaccination and we're trying to play catch up.
Meanwhile, the push to get people vaccinated stalling out. 71 million Americans still haven't received a single vaccine shot. 44 million of those are children.
The Biden administration once again extending that COVID public health emergency. The move means millions of Americans can continue to have special access to health insurance and telehealth services. Diane?
All right, Eva Pilgrim, thank you. And earlier on Good Morning America, Robin Roberts spoke to President and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Dr. Richard Besser, about the new data from Moderna and concerns over the new variant. Let's listen.
Should people wait until those new vaccines are approved before getting their boosters, Rich?
You know, Robin, there's a lot of things people have to think about here. One is, what is your own personal risk? Are you in a group that's at a greater risk for hospitalization or potentially dying from COVID? One of the challenges here is that the vaccine manufacturers are really chasing the variants as they mutate. So the Moderna data that they shared in their press release is encouraging in terms of targeting Omicron overall, but it's not as good against these new BA.4 and BA.5 variants. And I think by the fall, we could be seeing even other variants. So my recommendation is that each person should remain fully vaccinated, up to date in terms of who they are, what vaccine they received, their age group, and their risk factors. And that will vary. So talk to your doctor about that. I've gotten my second booster, and I expect that this fall I'll be getting another booster, whether it's one of the same or whether it includes an Omicron variant. It's too soon to say on that.
And Rich, picking up on part of what you just talked about there, you know, much of what we're hearing about the new variant is concerning, though, as we keep emphasizing, it does appear that it's not causing severe illness at this point. But how does this new variant, how does it respond to antibodies from vaccines and previous infections?
Yeah, you know, as the virus changes, as it mutates, little changes occur to parts of the virus. One in particular called the spike protein. That allows the virus to get around the protective factors, those antibodies that the vaccines and previous infection have given us. We get some protection because, as you're right, we're not seeing an increase in deaths around the country, thankfully, but we are seeing a lot of increase in cases, and that is because of those small changes that occur. And until this virus is controlled everywhere around the globe, we're going to continue to see a lot of new strains coming, and that's going to be challenging to us all.
And Rich, bottom line this for us. I don't have to tell you, there is so much fatigue right now, a bit of confusion. What is the most important thing that you want our viewers to know this morning?
Yeah, I would say know that everyone's risk is not the same. There may be someone around you who has a disability, who has a medical condition that puts them at increased risk. What you do matters for them. Know what's going on in your community so that as the levels go up, you can take those steps like wearing masks indoors that could help protect you, your family, and those around you.
All right, Dr. Richard Besser, always a pleasure to see you again. Thank you so much.
Our thanks to Robin Roberts for that. Meanwhile, more than 1,600 people are being ordered to evacuate as firefighters race to contain the Washburn fire near Yosemite National Park. The flames are closing in on the park's iconic sequoias, being fueled by hot, dry conditions. Will Carr has the latest.
The Washburn fire raging through California's Yosemite National Park, scorching more than 2,700 acres since it sparked last week. This time-lapse video capturing the rapidly spreading smoke. That thick plume hovering over the park's grizzly giant, a sequoia that's over 200 feet tall and thousands of years old. At one point, the flames reaching another sequoia nearby. Firefighters racing to put out the flames. They're using sprinklers, backburns, and hand lines to protect Mariposa Grove. Crews doing everything they can to fortify the ancient trees. While the fire has not significantly impacted the sequoias, they have been burned by wildfires in recent years. Thought once to be impervious to damage by wildfires, 6 fires in the last 6 years have impacted 85% of sequoia groves. Nearly 20% of the tree population has been killed since 2020. Crews are doing everything they can to protect those sequoias, including fighting fire with fire. This is a backfire. They're hoping these flames will cut off the fire's path. Those measures and more leaving crews on the ground cautiously optimistic.
So the fire could come through, but if it did, it's not going to move as rapidly as what we're seeing outside of the grove in the areas that have not been treated like this.
The fire's now more than 20% contained, and crews are hoping to up that number over the next 24 hours. Smoke is spread across this region and is contributing to bad air quality. Diane.
All right, Will Carr in Oakhurst, California. Thank you. Coming up, Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to visit Iran. How the trip raises the stakes when it comes to weapons and the war in Ukraine when we come back. Welcome back. The White House says Iran is getting ready to send Russia hundreds of drones to use on the battlefield in Ukraine. As the Kremlin says, Russian President Vladimir Putin will visit Iran next week. Now, if Iran does provide military support to Russia, it would raise the stakes in Ukraine and test the U.S. warning to other countries not to aid Putin's war. Foreign correspondent Tom Sufi-Burridge joins me live from Kyiv, Ukraine, for more on this. Tom, how significant of an escalation would Iran aiding Russia be, and how could the U.S. and its allies respond to that?
Well, Dan, the US already has considerable sanctions on Iran. Relations between Iran and the US and the UK are pretty dire. The EU, European allies of the US, of course, in this war and more broadly, have a bit more leverage, I think, on the Iranians. But I think it's no massive surprise that the Iranians are lining up with the Russians. Broadly speaking, their rhetoric since the war began here is very much in line with Moscow's take. I think some analysts might point to whether or not this says something about the weaponry, the stocks of weaponry that Russia has at its disposal right now, and whether this sort of says something. You look at the fact that Russia has been pounding Ukrainian cities out east on a daily basis. They've been using up a hell of a lot of their weaponry and munitions, and maybe this is a sign that Russia now needs to go to other countries to increase its arsenal in this war.
Now, the death toll from Saturday night's missile attack in Chasiv Yar has risen to at least 43 people killed. It's one of the deadliest strikes of this war. So what's the latest on the search for survivors there?
Well, that death toll has just come in, Diane. That's a kind of breaking line we've had within the last few minutes. So I think it just tells you this was an attack on Saturday. It gives you an insight into the devastation on those two residential blocks out in this very small city out in eastern Ukraine, not far from the front line. 43 bodies now recovered, 9 survivors pulled out of the rubble, including the body of a 9-year-old boy. This is a devastating attack, and the recovery operation at least continues. They might find survivors, but I think that's increasingly unlikely.
And Ukraine is now fighting back. Local officials say they hit a Russian ammo depot in the Kherson region overnight. What's the latest on the fighting?
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about the fighting out in the eastern Donbass. The UK Ministry of Defence saying that the Russians have made very small gains within the last 24, 48 hours in that area. But significantly, we're seeing more and more talk here in Kiev about the southern front. That is where you mentioned Kherson. That was taken by the Russians in the early stages of this war. The Ukrainians seem to be using US-supplied HIMARS rocket systems increasingly. If you look at the broad picture over the last couple of weeks, we're seeing increasing evidence of Ukrainian strikes behind enemy lines, and the Ukrainians within the last 24 hours saying they took another village along the front line there in the south, and the Ukrainians really talking up the idea of a full-scale offensive in that area. It's unclear when that might come, but it would be significant.
Tom, a prisoners' rights group says that Russian forces are recruiting prisoners from penal colonies in several Russian cities to come fight in Ukraine. What's the state of Russia's ground force?
Well, on a briefing with Western officials recently, Diane, I basically heard that they described the Russian forces in this war in Ukraine as a cocktail of forces. That Western official was at pains to point out that there are Chechen forces, Russian Chechen forces, that Russia is, they claim, using a mercenary group called Wagner, which has been quite active in Africa. It's very closely linked to the Kremlin. And then you have regular Russian units as well. So Western analysts and officials believe that Russia has an issue in terms of replenishing its forces in the long term. We're more than 4 months into this war. This war is not going to end in months. It might go on years. But at the same time, that is an issue that the Ukrainians face too, right? I mean, we're seeing heavy casualties on both sides. The Ukrainians need to keep basically replenishing their reservists. We're seeing extensive training. The UK now has a program to train around 10,000 Ukrainian troops. And this is really reflecting how, in the long term, this war is not going to be won purely on this battle or that battle. It is really about which of the two armies can not only sustain their weapon supplies, their munition supplies, but also the ground forces they have in that battle on multiple fronts.
Tom, is there any sign of either side here running out of gas, so to speak? And where does it stand in trying to find a negotiation, an end to this?
I think we're nowhere near any type of negotiation. Talking to a presidential official here in Kiev over the weekend, there are no talks right now between Russia and Ukraine. And the Ukrainians don't have an appetite to go into talks at the moment. They feel that any talk and we've heard this in certain European capitals over the last few months, of them conceding territory to reach a deal is a non-starter, because they had those kind of negotiations for 8 years, ever since 2014, when Russia really created a war in the east of Ukraine via proxy forces. And look where it got them. Russia launched a full-scale invasion at the end of February. So I don't think we're any close to negotiations yielding any kind of positive results.
All right, Tom Sufi-Burridge in Kyiv, Ukraine for us. Stay safe, Tom. Thank you. Coming up, the universe like we've never seen it before. The images showing some of the first galaxies ever created and what it could mean for space exploration when we come back. Welcome back to ABC News Live. More baby formula is expected to arrive in the U.S. from overseas this week to help ease the nationwide shortage, including a shipment arriving in Chicago today from Singapore. The Department of Health and Human Services says this week's shipments will amount to roughly 8 million 8-ounce bottles worth of formula. Meanwhile, Abbott, one of the nation's largest baby formula suppliers, has reopened its plant in Sturgis, Michigan, after severe flooding forced it to shut down again last month. And we are getting a look at the universe like we have never seen it before. These are new images from the revolutionary James Webb Space Telescope. It's showing some of the first galaxies ever created. The images are the clearest pictures of the universe ever captured. And it is Amazon Prime Day, one of the biggest bargain days of the year. Prime Day influences sale prices all across the internet, and our Becky Worley has what you need to know to get the best deals.
Amazon Prime Day, Target's Deal Days, and a myriad of other sales are on. But
impulse purchasing can quickly make your budget go out the window. So it's important to make sure that you're really shopping for those items that your household needs and not just buying something because it's on sale.
Conway says the users of the Slick Deals site are focusing on a lot of staples, clothing and shoes, electronics, home and personal care items, Amazon Basics, their house brand of essentials, and food and pantry items. So let's start with the ultimate staple, food. I compared Amazon's cereal, cookie, and mayonnaise promotions to my local supermarket, and the Amazon prices were lower or equal with only a $4.99 Amazon delivery fee. Amazon also promoting many of its Amazon Basics, from memory cards to its A-plus branded medications. For example, Amazon soft gel ibuprofen, half the cost of some pharmacies, and 30% cheaper than a big box store in my area. But among the essentials, lots of temptations, especially those lightning deals. They're some of the biggest discounts, and they're listed on the Today's Deals section of the Amazon website. They often last between just 4 and 12 hours. So how do you stay focused on just what you need?
Shop ahead of time and put those items in your cart so you can kind of monitor them throughout the day. If it hits a point where you're comfortable with the price, that might be the best time to buy for you, because you may not have time to sit there and monitor the prices all day.
But remember, Amazon Prime Day is for Prime members only. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial, though. You just have to remember to cancel it. Also, deals come and go. Right now, I'm seeing a gift card deal. Buy a $50 gift card and get a $12.50 credit. Some caveats apply, but it's a good deal. Also, an Apple Watch Series 7, over $100 off at $309. But remember, the best way to save is to make a list of needed items and stick to it. Diane, I feel like Squadron Leader from Star Wars. Make your list and stay on target. Stay on target.
It is great advice, Becky. As always, thank you. And thank you for joining us. I am Diane Macedo. Stay with us as ABC News Live continues with more news, context, and analysis. We'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.